the song ended, I was just.
It's a blessing, yeah. Life is a blessing, it's a blessing, and I know it. Yes, wow, now share my thoughts. Yes, to the world, yeah. Oh, share my thoughts.
Blessed Love Massive. Once again, it's a Wednesday. www.saharafmradio.com. Coming to you straight out of New York City. They say New York is the greatest city on earth. True? Well, subject for another discussion. But the discussion today, the discussion on which I'm inviting you to share your thoughts, is one that has bugged me for a very long time, and there are other people that this issue concerns as well. Is that of our African dialects and languages, which seem to be dying out, which seem to be facing extinction. There's actually a list of endangered African languages and dialects, and there's like lots and lots and lots of them. First of all, Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent on earth. There are more languages and dialects and tongues on the African continent than there are anywhere else on earth. However, these languages, dialects, tongues, most of them seem to be dying out. Those that are not dying out seems to have been diluted to the point where it's hard to trace their original foundations anymore. What's worse, a lot of Africans take pride in speaking other languages, like English, French, and all of those other languages, rather than speaking their own dialect. In certain places, it's actually considered uncouth to speak your own language. It's called vernacular. In certain places, you get whipped in school for speaking your own language. Well, let's dissect this subject and see why it is the way it is and what are the possible fallouts to such a scenario. Joining me to do justice to this subject in the studio is Dr. WUMI Akintide. Dr. Akintide is a writer, a publisher, and a man that I personally look to for inspiration as far as being a proud African goes. Later on, we'll also have in the studio the man RUDOLF Okonkwwo. RUDOLF Okonkwwo is a television personality. He's also a writer, and he's a satirist. He'll be joining us very soon. Also reaching us via Skype from Ghana is a linguistic expert, Kwesi Boaten. Kwesi Boaten wants to be identified simply as a linguist, but this gentleman has done extensive work in linguistic patterns in Ghana and other parts of Africa. So, brace yourself. Bring your messages on the Facebook page and they will be read. Stick and stay, don't go no place as we delve into the subject. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you.
And Kwesi, welcome.
And greetings to all of you from Ghana.
Fantastic. How is Ghana? Ghana is beautiful still, I believe.
Ghana is very beautiful. First of all, let me congratulate you guys for choosing this subject because these issues on language are hardly discussed by the media. And it goes to tell you the problem we have with language. And so let me congratulate you guys.
Well, thank you very much. But it also goes to show the kind of work we do here at Sahara. Sahara is not just the average commercial radio, TV, media house. We are Afrocentric, and our views, are not just our views, but everything we do is geared towards the motherland. So thank you for the compliment anyhow.
Okay.
All right. Before we start, now Rudolf Okonkwo is here. He's just joined us in the studio. I'm going to ask Rudolf to set this up for us. There's a beautiful poem about the snail and the tortoise or something like that you shared with us. Can you share with everyone else who's listening at least the first phrase?
There one on the by. So yeah, that poetry was written over 2,000 years ago by one of my descendants.
2,000 years.
Yeah, before Christ. So and it's called Waninga. It's the name of a tortoise that is part of the Igbo storyline. So it goes like this: Waninga, Waninga, Gene Melo, Waninga, Nokwa, Tibulu, Waninga. And the chorus is Waninga, Waninga, Gene Melo, Okwa ho, Nampo, Mawalokwa, Nokwa, Tibulu, Waninga. Waninga, Waninga, Gini Melo, Mbaho, na kikatala mpo na mpo mawalokwa n'okwa tibulu Waninga.
Waninga, Waninga. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, Rudolf. I really love that. I really love that. And on my own part, I'm going to start with a proverb.
Yeah, but before you do that, let me announce that the album is dropping next year, so stand by.
Definitely. Sell me the first autographed copy. But yeah, I'm going to start with a proverb from my own native homeland. It says, Obanyansafo umfaninsa tebin inche neja nifie. It means the wise child does not use the left hand to point to the father's house. And we from Africa know the significance of the left hand.
Yes.
We do things more with the right hand, so it kind of says a lot. But all this is connected with language. Let me go to Ghana and start with Kwesi Boaten. Kwesi, are our languages and dialects really at risk? Are they really dying out?
Thank you very much. Yes, they are dying out. On two fronts. The number of people who speak particular languages are reducing. There are many reasons for that. And also, people are not giving value to our languages. And so generally people are not using our languages. And so it is a big problem. To start with, I think it has to do with the system of education we are pursuing here in Africa, or let me say in Ghana. The system was bequeathed to us by the colonialists, and they had their own agenda. And so they did not give priority to our languages. But over all these years, I thought we would have known better and would have changed our system to suit ourselves, but we haven't. And so our languages, the indigenous languages, are of little value, to the extent that I heard you early on, that even in our secondary schools, in our basic schools, you enter a school and the first thing you see, do not speak vernacular, speak French or English. And even in our homes, now parents are encouraging their children, their wards, to speak English, because there's this erroneous impression that if you start speaking English with a kid from that very age, then the kid can become very good in English and so on. And so it's a big problem that we need to confront. But unfortunately, like I said earlier on, we give little attention to generally issues of language, as if we do not realize that they play a very crucial part in our developmental efforts. And that is why I congratulate. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's why I first of all congratulated you, and I'm repeating it. It's a very good thing you are doing, and I wish that the media back home here in Ghana would take issues of language seriously and deal with the issues.
Definitely.
But see, at a point in time, for instance, in Ghana, a minister of education, raised this issue and condemned the fact that at the very primary level, some schools were even trying to teach the kids in their various languages. It became a very topical issue, and that is where I sense that we do not actually realize how our local languages help us in our development efforts. And let me elaborate a bit. As a linguist, I know that our language is like, in fact, language, not our language, is like a container that contains our culture. And so if we put it aside, it's like putting our whole culture aside.
Yep.
And that is what is happening in Ghana. And if I say Africa, I think it's happening in other parts of Africa, like Nigeria and so on. But I'm more conversant with the situation in Ghana.
Most
so
definitely.
In Ghana.
Yes, I mean it is definitely happening in other parts of Africa. But let me come to you, Doc.
Yes.
Let me ask you this: what really do you think is causing this? Kwesi has just mentioned education, like how the colonial masters educated us to think and to act that way.
Okay.
What else? What are some of the other factors?
Okay, first of all, before I answer your question, I'd like to join my other colleague, the linguist from Ghana, to explain that part of what is causing this problem is globalization. You mentioned it, or the advent of technology and the advancement of technology, whereby the whole world has now become one global village.
Yep.
You do things, what we are doing here right now, it could be transmitted and heard all over the world, including Japan, China, just mention it. So because of that, a lot of our local, some of our languages in some of our countries, we are losing touch with them and we are not keeping them alive. And it's a pity because like the other guest said, you cannot indoctrinate in a foreign language. And if you lose your language, you are losing part of your culture. That is very, very correct because culture and language are interwoven and there's no way you can separate them. Take, for instance, in the case of Nigeria, she said he's more familiar with what is happening in Ghana. I'm a little bit more familiar with what is happening in Nigeria. In Nigeria, for instance, part of the reason why we're having the problem we're having, the problem of ethnicity, tribalism, is more so because we don't understand ourselves. I will tell you that there are about 252 tribes in Nigeria the last time I checked. And the number of languages and local dialects is almost as high as that number. So, but out of all this cacophony of languages and dialects, you have three predominant ones. You're talking about Hausa for the north and Igbo or Igbo for the east, and Yoruba for the west. Those three languages, in fact, as far back as more than 50 years ago, I recall, as an administrator in the Federal Public Service of Nigeria, in the time of Wenike Briggs. Wenike Briggs was Commissioner for Education in the Federal. And after Wenike Briggs came A.Y. Eke, the former registrar of the University of Ibadan, who also became Minister of Education. And serving them, were two distinguished Nigerians. One of them was Chief S.O. Awokoya, who was a very, very powerful minister of education in the Old West, and he came to the federal to become a chief federal advisor on education. And there's one Mr. S.J. Cookie, I think he's from Rivers State too. After Awokoya came S.J. Cookie. At that time, there was a focus, there was an awareness that Nigeria has to do something about preserving their languages.
What year was this, Doc?
This was about 1979 to 85.
Well, I'm asking you this because I'm aware that at a point in time there was a policy in Nigeria
Yes.
where there was an experiment.
Yes.
Kids were taught in kids, the local dialect was
Yes.
used as a primary
In fact,
medium of instruction. Was this
correct?
under this
It was
person that
around
you're
the same
talking
time.
about?
It was around the same time. As a matter of fact, around that time, the Radio Nigeria used to have a program they call titled Wasobia. Wasobia, wa in Yoruba language means come. Zo, zomana in Hausa means come.
So yeah, that's right.
Bia, Bia.
In Igbo.
I'm sure that Rudolf will tell you about that. It all means come.
That's interesting.
So they form it together and they call it Wazobia. It was a program that featured on Nigerian radio. And at that time, the whole idea was to try and preserve, if not all the 250-something languages or dialects, at least three predominant
That
ones.
itself presents a problem, and we will come to that. But
Yes.
first of all, let me hear from you, Rudolf. Why should we be concerned?
Oh no, I think they've just touched on those topics, which is that there are a lot of things about the language that is connected to the culture. You can't lose it. Once you lose the language, virtually it won't take any time before you lose everything about the culture. But I think part of the problem is that we Africans maybe we are lazy too in terms of what we can do. The Wazobia thing was a very creative idea, but what could have been something workable is to try to maybe integrate the three languages into one. I mean, I hope the discussion will go into the experiment in most of East Africa where Swahili is a language of communication. And it's amazing when you look at Kenyans and Tanzanians and Ugandans, there is something that tends to bring them together, and that is that language, the Swahili. Beyond English. It's amazing when you see their president speaking in Swahili.
I want to draw your attention to this, though. There's a dialect called Sheng, which is like a pidgin, which is taking over in that area.
Okay.
So I don't know how successful Swahili has. And Swahili itself, really, if you really get into the dynamics of it, it's not an African dialect.
No, I know. It's from
Swahili
Arabic
is a
and
mixture of
Arabic and but that's what I'm saying. It's something mixed. And I was thinking that in the case of Nigeria, because it's difficult, the problem with Wazobia is that some other small ethnic groups that were left out, and they are not going to sign up on adopting all these major ones who they already feel are dominating. So, but if we can come up with something, just like you have Swahili that came about. That it will be acceptable to everybody.
Rudolf, I want to follow up on that. There was an attempt to make Hausa the lingua franca of Nigeria.
We will get to lingua franca.
Because of the same something that you are raising, the other tribes were a little bit jealous.
It happens everywhere. In Ghana,
they said if Hausa becomes the lingua franca, just like it is in the military in Nigeria, Hausa is the language of the military.
Is it?
All of them. That is why the military officers like Obasanjo, Ojukwu, mention all of them. Adekunle Ajati, they speak Hausa fluently.
I see.
Because it's the central language.
Is that among the rank and file?
The rank and file, yes. That's what they do.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Anyhow, did you want to finish on that point you were making? Or
No, that's the
okay. All right. So let me go to Kwesi on the phone. Kwesi, let's focus on the courses that we have mentioned. We've mentioned education. We've mentioned globalization. We've mentioned colonialism and all of that. How exactly did these factors come to bear on our language like that? I mean, we have our language. If anybody comes and says, "Oh, I want you to speak this language," we don't even know the language. We just speak our language. How did it affect us like that?
First of all, when the colonialists took over, like I said before, they had their own agenda. And so whatever they did, they looked at it from their point of view. So for them, it was going to be easier for them, to get us to understand them, not necessarily for them to understand us. They wanted us to understand them, and they wanted us to see things, from their own perspective. And that is what language does, because the words that we are speaking now are concepts. And concepts, we actually think in concepts and so on. And so these concepts are given to us in language. And so when they started, that was one of the areas that was very important to them, the language, and later on, or let me not say later on, but also the religion. The religion and the language were two tools that they used to get us to, as it were, conform to their own perspective. And it has continued from then to today.
It has, Kwesi. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I have a different perspective.
Kwesi, come again.
No, finish your point. Finish your point first.
Yes.
But while you are at it, though, Kwesi, I want you to consider this, as you continue. No, how did we get to the point where we ourselves thought it's primitive to speak our own language? How did we get to that point? That's more what I'm interested in.
That is something I want to talk about.
Okay, so Kwesi finish, and then we'll have Doc come in on that.
Kwesi, it's not only the language, it's the whole culture. Let me give you a typical example of Ifremamo. Ifremamo is renowned, and I think, I don't know if you other panelists have heard of Ifremamo. Ifremamo was an Africanist, and Ifremamo wanted to become a catechist. And so he was being trained as a catechist. Then, about the time they will pass out, he used to dress in African clothes. And they insisted that he stopped dressing that way and dressed in trousers, shirt, and tie. He refused, and because of that, they did not ordain him as a catechist. And so this is what they did to get us to conform. Then under colonialism, we did not have that say. So by the end of colonialism, we had already conformed. They had gotten us to become what they wanted us to become. And so from that point on, we were seeing things from their own perspective. And it's disheartening even today. Everything we do here today, we look at it from their own perspective.
That's right.
So then that we raise issues, but then we look at solutions from the solutions of the West, for instance, because that's all we know. And it's continuing throughout education. Everything they have taught us, everything is not from our perspective.
Right.
Let me give you another example. I did linguistics, for instance.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I realized that I could have become a linguist without having done the linguistics of my language, because the linguistics of Akan was an elective. So I could have decided not to do linguistics of Akan. That way I would have become a linguist still without, having done the linguistics of my own language. And Kwesi, it is serious, because I thought, for instance, that if we say education, first of all, education was to give us literacy skills, how to read and write, and based on that, we'll be given all the information and knowledge that follows.
Yeah.
Is it not strange that at the end of the day, even the professor in Ghana, with all the English that he can speak or whatever, cannot read or write his own mother tongue
language, which is something that we also will get into, and which is really shameful. But let Doc chime. Doc wants to chime in on that.
Yes, but what I'm actually saying, you can blame the colonialists for trying to actually make us forget our own language and then adopt theirs. But they are not the only ones to blame. As a matter of fact, those of us here, there are 3 of us here, we are equally guilty of it.
Really?
Yes. For instance, my son is married to a Filipino girl. And the children of my son, they've never gone to Philippines. They've never lived there. But because the wife of my son brought her own mother as the nanny, and so the mother continues to speak Tagalog to the kids. So today, the kids are able to speak English and speak Filipino language, which is Tagalog. And yet, these are Nigerians, Yoruba. They don't speak Yoruba.
What prevents your son from speaking Yoruba or whatever other language to them?
That is the problem. That's why I say it is partly our fault. Because, I mean, those of us who have children in this country would rather prefer for our children to be fluent and very eloquent in English, which is the major language here for commerce, for everything. And we won't even encourage them to speak our own language.
See, Doc, that also has its different angles.
Yes.
Because the fact of the matter is that we're living in a global society
Really,
where, I mean, if you send your child to school, you definitely want them to be able to communicate with everybody else.
Good, but when they come home,
exactly. So
when they come home,
exactly,
you can teach them. For example, most people here, if you're a Yoruba man, when your child wakes up in the morning, I'm not sure they do that too much in the Igbo culture. Your son or your daughter is supposed to kneel down and greet you. But those of them that are born here, it's an aberration to do that. Yeah, they will laugh at that. In fact, rather than do that, they would just like to shake your hand. And that is never done. And parents who encourage children to continue to do that lose a little bit of their culture.
Let me say that current studies, they indicate that if a kid speaks more than one language, it's an advantage. It's not really a disadvantage. Yes. But the old theory was that if you want your kids to learn English, you should not teach them any other language. Now, let me point out a few things. You know, the idea of what happened, I think if we had structured government in Africa around each ethnic group, that the language will have survived more than the structure we inherited, which was a country that now we have to adopt a single language. Yeah. So because if the Igbo people had been governing themselves under Nigeria, yes, the chances are that they wouldn't be forced to abandon Igbo language. Or if the Yoruba people, just you know, there's a move now in some states in the West to adopt Yoruba again as a language of.
In fact, what they should have been doing, Rudolf, they should have, since we started having universities with the University of Ibadan, Nsukka, Ife, and Ahmadu Bello, they should have made, if our educational policymakers had the foresight, they should have made it compulsory, just as our students are learning French or Spanish, to learn Hausa, Igbo, because they can't learn all the 250 something. Yes, but at least have it in their curriculum. And then people will be able to speak it.
The age-old argument that comes back is that these are not universal languages. You know, people will learn to speak them, but they would speak them for use locally. Yeah. But you're training students for like an international market.
Yeah, but the mistake they are making, they say they are not universal language. If part of the reason why the unity of Nigeria is so suspect is because we don't speak the same language.
But that's not.
For example, if we speak Hausa, for instance, if we speak Hausa to an Hausa person, you are more or less, they regard you as a brother right away.
I beg to differ on that, but let's move this forward because we have limited time. Okay. But I really beg to differ on that because the other countries which have various languages, but they're still able to form a common national fabric. Ghana is a good example. Ghana has so many languages, but still they've been able to. There's Hausa. They speak Hausa in Ghana.
Dominant ones too.
They are, but that also has its own problems.
Ga, Tui, and all of that.
They are. But anyway, Kwesi, Rudolf, I have a question for you, but let me go to Kwesi first. Kwesi, hello, Kwesi, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, good. We know about pidgin language. I mean, the pidgin dialect. Yeah. Nigerians have the original, if I can say so, pidgin. Ghana, we have our own version of the pidgin. Sierra Leone, Liberia, there are different types of pidgin. In Kenya now, they have the sheng. For the lost children who were sent outside of Africa, they have different types of patois. These are not languages, African languages in themselves, but they are languages or dialects that have come out of our mother dialects and the language that was forced on us to still forge a mode of communication. Is this an advantage or is it a disadvantage?
We can look at it from, two angles. If you go to like Nigeria, for instance, the pidgin they speak, it has become a lingua franca to the extent that I know almost every Nigerian can speak the pidgin, even if he's had formal education or not.
Yep.
And so it is serving that purpose. But that is as far as it goes. But if we realize that the language we speak, because what are we speaking? We are looking at our space, the space we have and the things in them. Those are the things we have codified into language and we are using. And so when we are not using them, we are abandoning things that are in the language. Because let me give you a typical example. I don't know how I would say this in English, but we used to, have something like amanier, mission.
Yep.
If you go to a place, they ask you of your mission and so on and so forth. In Ghana, it used to be such that if I come to your home and you ask me what has brought me there, I will tell you every important thing that you need to know, between, the last time I saw you and the present. I will tell you every important thing that you need to know from where I came. Then you will tell me what I need to know from where you are.
Yep.
After we have done that, we come on the same page, and it means we can work together. We no longer have that, because we are not speaking the language. If we had translated these things, for instance, into English, it could still be serving the purpose. But we haven't. We haven't. In the larger analysis, Kwesi, generally we have become a people that see white man or from the West to be better than what we have.
Yep.
And this is where it started. I am not, when I said that early on, I am not exonerating us from blame, but I was answering a question as to how we got there. We could have done and we can still do a lot to change it. But unfortunately, most of us are thinking exactly the way these guys want us to think. If we were to deal with the issue, then we should realize that, good, English is good. It's an international language. We need it. But we should not learn English at the expense of
our own language, definitely.
Exactly. And like what one of your panelists, I didn't get the name well, but he said something to that effect, that, we have abandoned our language for theirs, and we are using their language, and so we are looking at things from
their point of view.
What
Yeah.
we need to do,
Yeah, that's
what
right.
we need to do now, Kwesi, is to realize that we need our language. And so, referring to what your panelist said, he said that if you speak more than one language, it means all other things being equal, you are more intelligent than the person who speaks one language.
Yep.
Because speaking two languages means you know two cultures.
Yeah.
And so you are exposed
to that. Yeah. I mean that ties in with the next question I was going to ask Rudolf.
Okay.
Rudolf, before I ask you that question though, let me share something with you. But back in university, one of our lecturers, who was a former minister of education, was faced with this question from the class, and what he said is that when he was minister, sometimes they would go to a meeting, like they will be negotiating with their partners from the West, and then they will hit, like a point where they have to step out or something. They don't need to step out. Right in the conference, they can be like, oh, Charlie, at the end, you say, say, we for do I'm like this now, that kind of thing. And then they'll just move on. So what it means is that they have like some kind of, even if it's perceived superiority, because they speak their own language and they speak yours, you don't speak theirs.
Now let me give you a personal example. My kids, they speak Igbo, not because of me, because my mother-in-law is with us. So we could go outside in public in an event, and something might be happening, and maybe they are not acting well. And I'll say, and I don't want to come out there and say, hey, stop doing this. I'll speak in Igbo to them. I can say anything in Igbo. If I get you, I'll break your head, whatever. And nobody will hear that. Nobody will know what I said. They won't call. Yeah, but the kids will understand. And they can talk to me too. If somebody like their friends with them playing and they do something and they don't want here. Yeah, they were born there. They don't want their friends to know what they said. They can come to me and say that in Igbo, and I will know what is going on without that. So it's a big advantage, and we underrate that. And people, the one that is frustrating is people in Nigeria. I had cousins who came here on vacation with their kids, and they are in Nigeria. They were born in Nigeria, but these kids cannot speak in Igbo, and in some cases they were living in Igbo land. We have people who were born living in Enugu, not that they are in Lagos or in Kano, where you can say because of the environment.
How does that happen?
because the assumption there for most people is that it's primitive language. It doesn't take you anywhere, and the old idea, which is still very predominant there, that when you speak another language with English, you go back. You are not at advantage. Now let me say something. I was writing a column this week that I didn't finish, but I discovered something. There's a newspaper in Abuja, Hausa language newspaper in Abuja, and they do interviews. And it's a wonderful interviews with all these prominent Nigerians. They go to their homes and talk to them. And one newspaper, in Hausa, and one newspaper has been translating these interviews into English. And it's revealing more than any interview I've seen in English, done in English with the same characters. So I feel that I was discovering, it's more clear what they are saying, and they go deeper into stories when they are talking in their language than when they are talking in English, the same people. And I think we are losing a lot. I would like, for instance, Obasanjo to sit down at his home and speak in Yoruba to a newspaper. And I think we are going to get more from that than talking to Obasanjo in English. And what I was writing in my column, I have been with Emeka Ojukwu, who was a prominent Igbo man, and he could speak English very well. But I've been with him where he was speaking Igbo. And it was different from deeper than what he was saying in English. And you can't say it's because of language that is a problem. Yeah, not just better, but even the ideas that were coming out from him were more pronounced and more profound.
The Asantehene, for instance, it was a custom that he did not have to speak any other dialect apart from Asante, right? But the current king, who is something of a revolutionary,
and educated,
very educated, decided to kind of scrap that, because sometimes you have like visitors from the World Bank, wherever, and he would just bypass that protocol and speak directly to English with them. Some people do not agree with that. He has his own reasons for doing that. But I think it was such a beautiful custom, Yes, you are educated. Yes, you're from whatever university, but you represent the pride, the spirit, the body of the people.
In
so
fact,
you have
to back you up, when all these great leaders from other countries.
I have a question for you, Doc. Please let Kwesi react, and then I have a different question for you. But you can add that.
With regards to that, even that, when he's sitting in state, he cannot speak any other language, even today. When he sits in state, in the privacy of his home and receiving visitors, he can do that. But when he sits in state, like a day, for instance, you know, which is an official occasion, he cannot speak any other language.
I see.
Apart from
I see.
Hello?
Yes.
And he needs to do that. But let me quickly say this. We seem to not realize the relation with this to development. But see, I am telling you, and I think it's like that in other African countries. The informal sector is far larger than the formal sector in Ghana today. And so the majority of our people cannot communicate effectively in English. And so in a situation where English is the language of education, language of business, language of blah, 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 the larger majority of Ghanaians are cut out from official communication.
Yep, definitely.
A huge disadvantage. In fact, if we were doing business, we should realize that, for instance, P is the most widely spoken in Ghana. It is not English. So why, even for business, why haven't we developed P to the level that it could be used for business?
Because Chief, because there's no tree word for certain things, which is also the question I was going to put to Doc after that.
I do not agree. It is because we have not allowed the language to meet those situations.
That's right.
Any situation a language met, the language will have a word for it.
That's true.
I can tell you, most of English words of the court and military were borrowed from the French. And that does not make English any less language. So language does that. If you meet a situation you do not have, you improvise and you exactly. But our problem is we have set our language aside, and it's like putting a child in a room and locking him up so he does not meet other children. Definitely, he's not going to be able to deal with them. And so we have caged our language. That is how come we do not have words and so on for
those kind of things. Very good point.
Those things you are describing. If we were allowing the language to meet those situations, we'll have words. Take a word like bokiti.
Yeah.
Bokiti is from the English word bucket.
Yeah.
When our forefathers met bucket, they did not have a word for it. Then they heard the sound like bokiti. And now bokiti has become a key word.
True.
You understand? It was a situation. Yeah, it was a situation where we allowed the language to meet bucket, and we had a word for it.
That's right.
And so we should,
we should open up to grow, to be dynamic. Definitely, Doc. Let me ask this to Doc. Parallels. We don't. Kwesi has raised that issue, but I'm still interested in your viewpoint. We don't have certain words in our local languages to describe certain things which are new to us, which is why sometimes we just bypass that and go straight to the language. Is this a real threat?
It is a real threat. In fact, if you see the practice, if you observe the practice at the United Nations, when head of state come from all over the world to address the General Assembly, you see that most of head of state who come from very great cultures, very important cultures. In fact, most of them, like Chinese. A Chinese head of state will speak in Chinese, and they have to get somebody to interpret.
Translate.
So is Japanese, Spanish, English, French, Arabic, and Iranian. For instance, the last time that the new president of Iran came here, he spoke in Iranian language.
He can speak English.
He can speak English.
He can speak very good English.
But he felt more comfortable speaking in his own language, so that most of the words that are not that he cannot express in English, he can comfortably find something near to it in his own language and be better understood. So it is very important.
It is. Rudolf, what's your take on that?
On
The parallels. Actually, I want you to look at it from this point of view. Are we losing something by, because I can give you an example from the Akan language. We have a word like chia.
Yeah.
I don't know the English word for chia. I don't even think there's a parallel.
This is what's going on in Igbo language.
I hear Kwesi laughing. I'll pick up your thoughts. I'll pick your thoughts after.
In Igbo language, we had one guy called FC Obaro. For a long time, he was the master. So he was finding new expressions to define new words that the Igbo people do not have. For instance, there were interesting ones like university. That concept was not there in Igbo language, and he defined it as mahadum. That is, you know it all. You know, so it was like that, and because then I don't know what is going on now, but then you had Igbo newscasts, you know, on state radio and state TV. So those newscasts will force those writers of this news to now
use the
words in Igbo words. So for instance, if you're talking about technology or DNA, they have to find a word for DNA, even though there was none before. So there was that kind of a lab where this is being manufactured and things and it grows.
Whatever happened to us? Because that's such a beautiful idea. In Ghana, for instance, university would be, even though we borrowed the word school and called it suku, suku, right? But then the university became sukupon, which is the big school. The big school. You know. No. So I don't know what's happening with what
there was
wrong?
one interesting one, technology, science and technology. In the translation in Igbo, it says Oluaka, that is technology, something you do with your hand. And then science, they called it Obalibogale. That is something that is the Igbo people do not understand. Obalibogale, this is beyond Igbo. You know?
That is science.
Science, yeah.
That is hilarious.
So you find funny things in those translations, but they are making efforts because you can't be talking to my grandmother when she was alive. You can't be talking to a radio station my grandmother is listening to, and you say science and technology. There's no way she will know what that would be.
Is there an Igbo dictionary?
Yeah, exactly. There's an Igbo dictionary. Let me tell you something interesting. I met a professor of English in Rhode Island, and he's Igbo, or he was Igbo. He's dead now. I mean, so I said to him, Things Fall Apart, our most famous book, written by Chinua Achebe, was not translated into Igbo. And people laugh at Igbo people. Yoruba people will say, that Okonkwo spoke Yoruba before he spoke Igbo. Yeah. So I said to this prof, I said, look, you are a professor of English. Why don't you take up that responsibility, translate Things Fall Apart into Igbo language? You speak Igbo, you know English.
And they have it in almost 182 languages.
Exactly. So you can see that part of the blame is us. If the Igbo people, their primary book by one of their most prominent sons was not translated into Igbo language. Yes. Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the white man again? And the white people actually, let me say this is very important. They translated the Bible into Igbo. And the controversy continues because if you go into, I don't know about other languages, Igbo language has different dialects.
Yes.
And white people came and they brought things together. And that language of the Igbo Bible, nobody speaks it in Igbo land. So it's a strange language, you know. There's no particular place you go. Somebody will be speaking like Amayim, you know.
That is happening around the world, especially in Africa. Because if you go, we have the street lingua right now. Right. I mean, if you go to Ghana, for example, people still speak their Twi, but 40%, 50%, sometimes even more is English. They will say things like, "Oh, Charlie, me kusku abaneya ko club, ko beer, you know, that kind of thing." Like what I'm saying is, I'm going to school, I'll be back, and we'll go and find some beer in the club or whatever. Yeah. But we substitute some of the words with English words. Yes. Are we killing the language slowly, or are we just adopting?
We are killing it slowly, and that is what the importance of this program we are doing today. You first of all create an awareness that this is happening, so that people can think of ways to improve on it and find a way to preserve our own language.
Okay.
in preference to some of the foreign languages that were imposed on us because of colonialism.
Okay.
Let me say before, the United Nations, they gave estimate that in 50 years, I think, several languages will die across Africa.
Yep.
This is how it's going to happen. It's very easy. I speak Igbo, but I can't write it because in school, I didn't take Igbo in school.
And that's part of the problem.
Yeah, so I can't write it. Now my kids, even though they speak Igbo, there's no way they can write it.
Yes.
And their speaking Igbo is temporary, it's not permanent thing, because by the time they leave home, they are not going to be speaking it, you know. But what will happen is that even in Nigeria, even in Igbo land, people are not speaking it. So in the next generation, they may be able to speak it, but they won't write it. Then in the next 100 years, it will, if nothing is done.
It has a good chance.
If nothing is done, it's over.
Maybe I should congratulate myself for schooling myself in writing my local language.
That's good.
Nobody really taught me how to write it. My mother is Catholic, right? And then they would give her the verse, the Bible verse for the week.
Yeah.
And she would pass it on to me. So at the age of like 12, 13, I was reading the Fanti Bible in church.
Okay.
And nobody taught me to read it. So I think I deserve some.
But you'll be right.
I congratulate your mother. I think it's also because he was a teacher.
Yeah, my mother is a teacher, so that also matters. But a teacher extraordinaire, because most other teachers would think, I'd better teach them English or whatever. But anyhow,
she was a conscientious teacher.
She was. But let's the time is fast creeping up on us, so let's try to keep the answers really short from now till I think we have about 10 or so minutes, maybe less. But Kwesi, let me ask you about the parallels again. What are some of the parallels that you think we don't have? I just need a few examples from you. I gave the example of chia, for instance. Do we have a parallel like that in the English language? Kwesi?
We're losing him.
Oh, I don't know what's happening with Kwesi, but let's push on. We will still try and raise him anyhow. Language also represents a sense of identity. It's a mode of communication, definitely, but it's more than that. It holds the soul of a people. Like you travel to, I'll give you an example. The first time I came to New York, I got on the subway and there's this guy on the phone busily talking to somebody in Tree. And I don't know him from Adam, but I was just moved to walk to him and say, "Where are you from, my brother?" In my language, you know, it kind of gives you a sense of pride and all of that. We're definitely losing that, Rudolf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now you can speak English, and you're my brother if you speak English.
But that's the other side of it. Yeah. That's the other side of it, though. English or whatever other foreign language.
If you want to know that, the importance of English is go to somewhere like Germany or somewhere that people don't speak English. When you see somebody who speaks English, it's like you were seeing your brother. Even if it's a white person, it's like, okay, these Germans, I've seen somebody who can speak.
But you see, that's what happened to me when I went to Nigeria for the first time. Yeah. I got to Togo, the gendarmes were like, passport, routine, whatever it is they were saying. And I was so confused. So I was like, and then I got to Togo, they're like, papier. I'm like, what's going on here? And I get to Niger, Lagos, and then I want a Coke. So I asked this small kid, where can I find a Coke? He's like, oh yeah, I'll go there now. And then I'm like, I am home. This is it. You know, so I totally understand what you're saying. Right. But let's also look at the issue of lingua franca. We've raised that, Doc has raised that already. Right. But when you want to make one language the lingua franca, the other smaller dialects will rise up against that. I mean, so how do we solve that? Do we just stick in our own corners, everybody speak their own language, or what? Because if you want to make Yoruba the lingua franca, maybe not even Igbo or Hausa, but some of the other smaller, you know, tribes might rise up and say...
But look at what I think the solution. I used to think about is in terms of Nigeria. So we have the three major ones.
Yes.
Nobody stops you if you are an Yoruba person and you are in Yoruba land.
Yes.
Nobody stops you from speaking or teaching people in Yoruba. Okay, what we might do is to say insist that all over the country, like for instance in Yoruba land, that they will teach students Igbo. and Hausa in the same school while they are also learning Igbo.
Exactly.
Okay, because it's also
Yes, but
happening.
I'm saying,
It's also happening.
what are some of the smaller tribes?
Yeah, but it's also happening. If you're a small tribe, okay, and you come to Lagos to live, you have no option but to learn Yoruba if you're going to survive in Lagos.
Exactly.
So you are already doing it.
Aren't you better off just bypassing those little petty squabbles and just English and everybody?
No, but you find that English is not enough. Like we said here, the taxi driver, the Molo driver, and the people that are selling potato orange, they don't speak English. You're better off if you can communicate in the local language.
All
right. So it's already happening.
Okay, Kwesi.
Yeah.
Yes, good. There's this question I have been dying to ask you. I know you were doing a project on like computers and the language, right? You were very obsessed about getting a tree keyboard, with the extra letters and the symbols and all of that. What's up with that?
Now I've been able to get something, at least on my computer. I can write in key. But the question you asked, goes to the heart of it. The value we give to our languages, because look, the Japanese are there. They have keys that we do not even use. And yet, they go on with their life, they communicate, they do everything in Japanese, in Chinese, and so on and so forth. We can do same. If we gave any value to our language all these years, we could have had, now RLD is even, assembling computers and so on in Ghana. We could have inserted those keys. But the bottom line is, we haven't realized the need, the value of our own language. We have come to a point that we think English is all. And that's not to say English is not important. Let me repeat, it's very important. We need it. But we also need our language. And we need to realize the value. And this is where I blame the educated class. Because at the end of the day,
there's no political will to push that agenda, obviously.
No, there's no political will. In Ghana, I know at the time it was a champon, that was around 72, who made an effort to get us a national language. But the committee, a champon set up itself, ended up fighting because of what you are talking about. Because, yes, and so on. But then, I think what we need to do is what Nkrumah started doing. Nkrumah identified 10 major languages. And the idea was to promote all these 10 major languages because he had divided the whole country into 10 and thought that each group could speak one major language. And so he was going to develop these 10 major languages and raise them to the official level. That project was abandoned. And I think we need to revisit that project. Because at the end of the day, they are important if we are to realize it is.
They are.
The way Nkrumah realized it. Then we would develop the language. I do not buy this business of we not having words for, other things, other scientific things. If you allow the language to meet them, we'll have words for them.
Definitely.
And in any case, we do not have to describe everything the way they do. For instance, in our news, when they meet a word like computer, they will say "fidie badrimba" to mean machine that thinks. Okay?
Yeah.
We don't really need that because, look, even the unschooled people today, they say computer. So computer is a universal language now.
Yep. So we can just cut to chase and call it computer and just move on with the rest of it. Isn't that diluting the language though? Because that's what we were just saying a while ago. Isn't that bringing in,
You see, that point it's about things you did not have and you have met. And seriously, if you met anything you don't know, you will ask the person with that and what is the name of this thing?
Yep, that's right.
And he will tell you, and you will say it to suit your phonological setup. And that is how come we have suku, we have bokiti, and we have so on. Our forefathers did that because then they met the white people, and their language was allowed to meet the white man's situation, and they had words. All those words that the white man brought,
and revolutionized it. Okay, our time is spent now. Producer has given me just about enough time to take closing comments. Let me start with you, Doc. What can be done about this situation? How can we, before that though, let me share a few statistics with you. The number one is what I said in the intro, is that Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent on earth. That's a UNESCO fact. Africa has more languages and dialects than any other continent on earth. The second point is that new languages are emerging. I don't know if I can call those languages though. At best, I can call them dialects, because an example is the pidgin, the sheng, all these things that we were talking about. And then number three is that 300 languages have less than 10,000 speakers in Africa right now. 300 languages have less than 10,000. That is not good. Number four is that 37 languages have been marked to die in 30 years' time. According to the researchers, these 37 languages in Africa are going to die.
You are saying, what can we do?
What can we do?
To preempt that.
Yep.
Part of what
to prevent that.
To preempt that.
Yep.
Part of what we can do is the kind of thing we are doing on this program, creating an awareness about the deficits in this area, and letting our policymakers review most of these things and begin to review our educational policies to capture the essence of what we're discussing here today. It cannot happen in a day, but at least with
that's what the politicians are supposed to do.
Yes.
How can we influence that?
We're influencing it by this kind of program. If there's any of our policymakers listening to this program on air, it's a starting point, because we are creating an awareness about the need to do this kind of thing.
Okay.
So my first suggestion would be that our policymakers, if they are listening, wherever they are, should make it a point of duty to start reviewing our educational policies to imbibe all of these recommendations we're giving here.
Fantastic words of wisdom. Rudolf,
yeah.
Isn't it pathetic though that we are conducting this whole exercise in English?
Well, that's the only way I can understand you. but this is what I think. One of the things we need to do beyond the dying languages is also to try to preserve it. And we have systems now where you can store people speaking the language, stories in the language, the way they are written. Yeah, so that even if they die off, okay, we can actually revive it and make it to resurrect the language if we have everything we need in that language. That's one. The other thing is also that NSA, National Security Agency in America, they've been listening to what world leaders have been saying, and a leader like Nigeria's president tries to, if the president is speaking Ijaw, it will be difficult for them. They will have tough time understanding what the president is saying. They have to get someone to translate. But also, you can also look at it the other way, that your president, if he's speaking English, it's even more difficult for them to understand the English he's speaking. So there's something to be said about the language and the fact that we don't hear stories of them listening to a Kenyan president speaking Swahili. Maybe they're having difficulty translating it. So the advantages, but we don't know it, and we have not promoted the advantages of these languages, and that's why people are home with the old theory that these languages are not of any help to anybody.
And some of our people who are now, I know of a professor at Rogers University in New Jersey, Professor Fakinlede, who created a Yoruba English dictionary for the use of most of our children, Yoruba children born in America. And it's a very helpful. That's a very helpful move.
It is. I was actually going to say that it's alarming that in this day of so much technology, we still aren't really making a concerted effort to actually, put all these things together and bind it in a volume so that we don't
even translations.
Dictionaries.
How much translations did we do? Like books that are written in classic books that are written in English or different languages translated into local. We didn't do that.
Okay, and we also know that some people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, for instance.
Oh, that's a good example. He tried to write in Kikuyu.
How much?
Not Swahili, Kikuyu.
Kikuyu.
And then what happened was that he found himself in a tough position. He would write in Kikuyu, and nobody will read the book. He will now translate it again to English. Say, translated by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Why don't you write in English? So that's what Dacho was saying. So why, so it's a difficult thing.
It is.
But what is "was up" in Yoruba? Was up in Yoruba?
Oh, what's up? Akinekon.
No, the one that was done for people born abroad. Do you know?
Oh, no, I don't know that.
It would be interesting to see that dictionary because that's a good point.
Share with us.
I don't know. But what I'm saying is that there will be, if you're writing for people born here,
yes,
you have to find different words that people at home may not be using to be able to communicate with the kids here. That's
Dr. Fakale, they did that.
The language definitely is dynamic. And like Kwesi said, I think we should let the language grow.
Yes.
If it has to pick words from other languages, I think that's fine. We should let it grow. But we should definitely keep the essence of our language.
Fish language.
Kwesi, final thoughts.
I'm here.
How do we rectify this?
I think first and foremost, our policymakers, have to realize the value we have in our languages. And they should go ahead to devise policies that would help us develop and promote our language. We should know, as Africans, like you said, we are highly multilingual. Ghana has over 50 languages. And here there is a kind of confusion because people have not learned to differentiate between language and dialect. Some are dialects of other languages, but at least I can work it about 50 languages. What it means is that naturally every African should be a multilingual. So then that our policy of monolingualism is bankrupt. Because, look, even forgetting about English, we have 50 languages in Ghana. So naturally, if we want to communicate well, we should pursue a policy of multilingualism. What is wrong with a Ghanaian child, for instance, being able to speak P very well, Ga very well, and English very well? That is an advantage. That kid becomes more intelligent than any other kid. All other things being equal. So we should pursue multilingualism, such that if we are, and the mind of the child is very, very elastic. If we decide to pursue that policy, I can tell you kids will grow up and they will know these languages that we expose them to. This thing of, from day one, getting kids to feel that the indigenous languages are not important. If a kid comes to school and clearly he sees, don't speak P here, speak English or French, you have told the kid that P is not important. And so as the kid grows up, he's not going to give any value to Chi. That's true. How come, that's how come when I was in school, for instance, in the Chi class, a question is asked, you know it very well, but you dare not answer because people will tease you that,
you know too much tree. That's right. So, anyhow.
And so, our policymakers need to realize that, and they should pursue a policy of multilingualism rather than monolingualism.
So well stated, so succinctly stated. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. WUMI Akintide. Thank you, Rudolf Okonkwo. And thank you, Kwesi Boaten, reaching us on Skype from Ghana. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for watching and listening to this program. I have had so much education today. And I definitely would like to pick this issue up in another format sometime soon. And I'm sure all my erudite guests will be available for me once again to do just that. Thank you so much for making the program.
Thank you very much. Baako, let me apologize that you could not get my picture for the program. I think next time around when you call me, I would have done something to get you my picture.
Definitely. You know what? I tried Googling you and I still didn't find any pictures, but it's all good.
I don't have my picture on the net.
yeah. Good for you. But anyhow, all right. So listeners, until next week, I want to leave you with another proverb from my homeland. It goes like this. Se ure fi ukrom hene na china ebe you wo begwem. To wait, if you forget the drums of the chief, or like your royal drums, you will be lost in the assembly of people, because all the different drums will be sounding, everybody will be dancing to the rhythm of their people, and you will be dancing waltz or something. Until next week, when we come your way once again with yet another scintillating edition of your favorite conscious vibes. This is yours truly, Jahbeloved, saying, keep the peace. Everything is good for what it's good for. One love.